Hey guys, it's me Lucid. Before the video starts, I just want to let you know this is a new style I'm doing every Sunday. It's going to be a radio style, so if you like this, please let me know. But I don't want to bore you with my talking, so let's get right into the video. My grandfather doesn't like to talk much. He only really mumbles, hello, goodbye, and if it's a good day for him, a few sentences. You see, my grandfather was 19 when he was forced to join the Soviet Union to defend Stalingrad from a Nazi invasion at the peak of Hitler's tyranny against Europe. This was known as the most intense close-quarter battles of the entire war. The entire town was pretty much rubbled by the end of it. My grandfather was one of those very few survivors from the start of the battle. After the war was over, he moved to England and had my father. I remember my father always used to tell me that Grandma told him that Grandpa slowly started to lose it after the war finished. She would ask him what happened, and received a beating in return. But then one day, he just stopped talking, stopped going outside, stopped loving pretty much. Turned into a blank human, just like a vessel, so she left him. She died well before I was born. We still visit my grandfather on Easter and Christmas every year, but he would just sit there and stare out his window the whole time we were there. Last Christmas, which was only a few months ago, I decided to ask my grandpa what happened to him. Grandpa, what happened? Considering he was too old to put a beating on me, I wasn't expecting a response from him, considering he ignores me 95% of the time, and he only ever responds with single words. But his eyes slightly but noticeably opened more. What do you mean? I could tell he knew what I meant, but wanted to avoid it. Well, Dad used to tell me about how Grandma said you changed after the war, and now you don't talk to anyone. You don't even talk to me. I've spent my whole life without a grandfather pretty much, and I just want to know. Why? I said in a slightly aggressive tone. He slowly turned his head from looking out the window to looking dead at me. The look in his eyes was far from those of a blank human. They were filled with pain and fear. Grandpa, are you okay? The next words my grandfather spoke, still to this day, send chills down my spine. They were hunting at the beginning. They only came when everyone started eating each other. He then turned his head back facing the window, looking outside. You couldn't hide. You had to run. I was frozen in shock from what my grandfather just told me. Who are they? I said in a trembly voice. My grandfather's eyes started to fill with water. I could notice he was breathing a bit harder now, as well. They were just soldiers at the start, but the Germans had never experienced the cold like we did. When they ran out of food and supplies, they did what starvation does to a person. They went crazy. They even started to feast on the dead Soviets lying in the streets, preserved by the cold. When the Nazis took the city, my unit was stuck inside one of the buildings, or what was left of it at least. We were in the cellar of one of the city center buildings, with enough food to last all of us, maybe a week. It was by luck that they didn't find the cellar. After the first week in the cellar, I woke up once again in the pitch-black darkness of the cellar, and the only light that I could see was through a crack in the cellar door. All I heard was screaming. My grandfather stopped for a second before turning his head, once swore towards me with the same look of pain and fear, and then said, They were too loud. They be coming from outside. I turned my flashlight on to see my best friend, dead, on the ground with his organs laying on the floor next to him, and two other soldiers from my unit alive, but covered in blood. But standing above them was someone, or something, face covered in blood. It was like a man, but disfigured. His arms and legs were slightly longer than humanly possible. Its eye sockets were empty, but covered in blood like they were fleshly ripped out of his skull. It had no lips as well, just pale white skin, with a huge, horrifying grin. The best way I can describe it is like that character from The Nightmare on Christmas, or whatever the movie you used to watch on Christmas is called. The Nightmare Before Christmas? I said. Yeah, that one. Anyway, the most disturbing part about what I saw was the thing had a Nazi uniform on. I screamed so loud that everyone in the room woke up instantly. Within a second, it was mayhem, everyone yelling and reaching for their guns. The thing let out a spine-tingling screech, then leaping out at one of our men, shredding through his chest almost immediately with his... I don't even know what to call them. Bony hands with spikes for fingers. At least 5 men shot this thing dead. That was the worst mistake we made. We didn't know there were more of them. Within a few minutes, we heard loud screeching from outside the door. The same screech as the creature that killed Rezgov. Who's Rezgov? I interrupted. He was my best friend growing up. He was like my brother. But I don't want to talk about him. I miss him too much. Anyway, we saw the door swing open. The lock must have been broken when the other one came in. Standing there was a fellow Soviet soldier. He looked like he hadn't slept or eaten in days. He told us that they knew where we are hiding. The Nazis? Said one of the soldiers. No, they were, but not now. Now they are something that evil, something God did not intend on having on this planet. I then heard another screech coming from the other side of the door. The soldier on the outside spun his head to look behind him and screams. That was the most blood-curdling, fearful scream I have ever heard. He yelled at us to run before running away from the door, away from one of those things. We all made a run for it. Running out of the door, guns in hand. The street was full of them. We spent fucking months playing cat and mouse with these things. I didn't eat for a whole month. I ended up making the decision to eat my fellow comrades. It was that or die. By the time the Germans had surrendered, there were 3 of us left. What the world doesn't know is the Germans never surrendered Stalingrad. We think we killed most of them, but definitely not all of them. To this day, I don't know what happened to the rest of those things, but I know one thing for sure. They're still out there, somewhere. And please, my boy, if you encounter one of these things, do not hide. They always know where you are. Run.